Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Alignment with AEs and SDRs with Mr. Tyson Chang. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom. How do we align better to achieve revenue like what ZoomInfo has been able to do? That's what I want to find out. Thanks so much for jumping on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, David. Super excited. Very passionate about this topic, as you know, from our prep sessions. So really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm going to get out of the way. I'll be in the chat box and in the Q&A. So if you have any questions, anything you're struggling with in this area, need some advice on, just throw them in there. We'll be sure that we get to them throughout the session.
Awesome. I appreciate it, David. Well, and just to reiterate that, I definitely want to make this as interactive as possible. I know we probably have a lot of AEs, some managers, some SDRs on here, and we probably have all had stories or like, man, does that make sense? Is that the way it's supposed to be? So if you have any questions that are super specific to your role, to your company, I'd be happy to tackle those and give my perspective on it. Well, other than that, we'll dive into some of the slides that we have prepared for you. And again, we really want to cover at a high level, like what does it mean to be aligned between AEs and SDRs? Now we've heard the marketing and sales alignment. That's definitely not what we're going to cover here. Really focusing on two sales teams with the same goals, driving revenue. How do we stay aligned there? My name is Tyson Chang. I manage the sales development organization, the outbound specific organization at ZoomInfo. I started off as an SDR, was paired one-to-one with some awesome account executives who really got me to the role that I'm at now. And so I think that'll be a big focus of what we cover here. Number one, got to cover our safe harbor statement. This presentation may contain some forward-looking statements that reflect our current views, or that may not reflect our current views with respect to, among other things, our service offerings and product features. They have forward-looking statements. So we ask that you not make any investment or any stock decisions based off of this presentation. What is the foundation for our AE SDR alignment? And just to sort of put things in perspective, right now we have about 230 SDRs in our organization and about 200 account executives. So we're a pretty large organization. When I first started off, there were 12 SDRs and about 12 account executives. So everything was one-to-one, which I actually think is super applicable to most organizations that are going to be on this presentation. Not everyone's going to be the size of ZoomInfo, but how do we sort of take what we're doing on the sort of large scale and apply it? And also, what were the growing pains and how do we develop that motion? And number one, our SDR AE motion is built on accountability and results. So we really believe in investing in the raw talent, That starts with the SDR. 95% of our sales, our closing account executive organization, started off in our SDR organization. So I think that's going to be foundational as we think about creating a path for SDRs, creating a relationship, fostering mentorship to get SDRs to that next role, which, unfortunately, I don't think there are very many SDRs that want to be an SDR for the rest of their life. They usually want to get to that closing role or get into management. And there's no better role to start in an organization than as an SDR to really build your career from the ground up. Really focus on upskilling, How do we give skills to SDRs to make them better account executives that also translate to better SDRs? We focus on coaching, leverage tools like Gong or any sort of sales engagement tool to record calls, and you should be able to review those and provide coaching and feedback just like you can on the account executive side with tools like Gong or Chorus. And I think the single most important thing for our organization that has led to our success, and if you've ever heard Henry Schuck, our CEO, talk about the SDR organization at ZoomInfo is the foundation for our entire company, We are really focused on building a clear career trajectory that's going to drive long-term success, but also, reduce turnover. The results that we've seen is an increased focus in our ICPs, our ideal customer profile. So we're no longer just going after accounts for the sake of going after accounts. We're really creating alignment between the SDRs and the AEs to go after the accounts that are going to generate the most amount of revenue, both for the SDRs, the account executives, and the organization. And then creating alignment around that ICP, on the target accounts and specifically the contacts. I know if you've been an AE, you've probably gotten a meeting. We call them no-pos here at ZoomInfo, which stands for no power. So we can set no-pos sometimes, and we have to turn that person into a champion or a coach. But if you don't have alignment between the SDR and the AE, that this is the purpose of the call, here's how we want to position this call on the account executive side, here's how the SDR set up that call, and there's really not a formula for success there. We leverage that by using ZoomInfo or any data tool really, or you can use your CRM, but just sitting people in a room, building a list of target accounts in your territory with those personas, leveraging ZoomInfo, the most accurate sales intelligence company and most accurate and dynamic sales intelligence tool on the market is crucial to something like this. If you have a pairing and your SDR is spending the majority of this day building lists or going on Google or going on LinkedIn just to identify people to go after, it's going to be really tough to create alignment because the AE is not going to get a ton of meetings. The AE also has to prospect and find those accounts himself and then send them to the SDR. So we really want to make sure we're setting up our reps for success and giving them the tools that they need to be successful. So how do we think about one-to-one pairings, right? Number one, it has to be a mutually beneficial relationship. It should be super clear how everyone makes money in that relationship. From the SDR getting paid on either a demo fee or a qualified opportunity or getting some portion of that revenue when that deal eventually closes, right? It has to be mutually beneficial, it cannot be one side. And my most important aspect when I think about one-to-one pairings, when I pair people, right, SDRs in my org with account executives, I'm looking for account executives that are going to be mentors to these SDRs, right? Unfortunately, there's definitely a hierarchy in every organization. If you think because you're an AE, right, that you're somehow better or a senior to your SDR, then you need to absolutely kill that mindset because it's going to kill your relationship and it's going to kill the organization's potential to grow and really keep that SDR long term. And the reality is if you're an AE with a paired SDR, you want to get that person so good when he becomes an AE, he's going to be better than you. The third part is accountability and feedback, right? You want to be able to set a meeting for an account executive if you're an SDR, and that AE needs to provide feedback back to you on the quality of that meeting, right? You have to come from a position of respect and empathy. That SDR is busting his butt to set that meeting for you, right? It does no one any good to berate them, right? To tell them that meeting was crappy because, right, it's the wrong person. Why would you set this for me, right? If you're in such a good position that you're hitting your number and the meetings that your SDR is setting you is just useless, then you probably don't need a pairing. You need to think about other ways to leverage that SDR. And the fourth bullet point, setting up that career path. AE's goal is to make them better than themselves, right? And I think one of the things that we really focus on here at ZoomInfo is we will not pair someone unless the AE says, right, I understand that this is a mutually beneficial relationship and I agree to these terms and conditions set forth by leadership, which are you have to be bought into the mentorship aspect. You have to treat your SDR with respect, right? You have to provide coaching and feedback when they ask for it, right? You have to treat them as an equal, right? Without those sort of foundational things, and that absolutely starts at the top from our CEO, Henry Schuck, all the way down to our VP of Sales, Steve Brierton and Lou Wolf, it is super important to have that buy-in from leadership to create that sort of mutual respect. What are some of the results that we're seeing? A huge increase in retention, right? When you work at an organization, I'm a firm believer. I do a ton of hiring, manage a ton of SDRs. Or I think people leave organizations for one of three reasons, right? Number one, they're not getting paid the money that they want. I saw a great question there about what's the best way to structure the comp plan, which we can cover. Number two, there's no opportunity for growth, right? If you're not creating a path for your SDRs to get to another role, they're going to leave, they're going to start over somewhere else. I'm sure we've all experienced that at some point. So you have to be creating that career path. And then number three, the hardest one to hear is they don't like the people that they work with. They don't feel respected, right? They don't feel like, they don't like their AE, right? We've all, and I've, unfortunately have to deal with some not so comfortable conversations, but right, if your SDRs are coming to you saying so-and-so is disrespecting me or so-and-so isn't giving me feedback, right, you should take that to heart and you should have a conversation. So the results, right, increased retention and productivity. SDRs feel like they're an equal to their account executive. They get paid, admirably compared to their account executive, right? Their SDRs ramp that much quicker. When your SDRs are ramping quicker, the AE gets better meetings, they're hitting their number quicker, and therefore the SDR is hitting their number quicker. And it's just sort of this awesome cycle of productivity. And then sales readiness, right? SDR should have the mindset going into the role that they're a closer, right? They are there to generate revenue for the organization. They're not just an appointment setter. They're not just there to, right, field inbound leads. They're there to set up calls that are going to turn into revenue, right? And all of that at its core is going to lead to company growth. You're going to create a culture that is conducive and attractive, right, for talent. You're going to constantly hit your number because you have this awesome culture and awesome relationship from pairings that's going to drive results. And when they're not driving results, now you have a mechanism and a process to evaluate why those results aren't working. So all in all, right, when you think about how we think about relationships or one-to-one pairings here at ZoomInfo, it is really foundational. The mentorship has to be mutually beneficial. There has to be a systems of accountability and feedback, both for the SDRs. This isn't, meant to be, obviously I'm a little biased being an SDR manager, but this isn't meant to be one-sided. If the SDR is not performing their duties, they're not hitting their call metrics, they're setting meetings, right, at accounts that aren't in that target market, right? That needs to be addressed as well. So here's a little bit about our SDR motion. The way that our organization is set up is we have really two different outbound functions. We have a many-to-many, we call those pooled SDRs. And what they're doing is they're going after the masses and setting those meetings for account executives in a round robin fashion. Then we have the paired one-to-one SDRs. They're identifying target accounts, typically in a larger segment. In this case, we call that strategic and strategic plus. The way we calculate or way to define those is sort of a black box. But basically, we're identifying high win rate characteristics such as industries, size, number of employees, revenue, and we're bucketing those leads and those contacts as sort of strategic and strategic plus. On the corporate and commercial side, it's everything that doesn't fall in that bucket. Those reps are typically more transactional in their sales process, so they don't necessarily need that one-to-one support. But I think a really important aspect to highlight here is an SDR's job shouldn't be done when they book that initial meeting. Right, we have a concept at ZoomInfo called a demo 2. And it's basically a meeting. It can be with the same person that you set up earlier. Maybe the opportunity has gone cold, right? Maybe the AE is overwhelmed with so many opportunities and so many meetings that he doesn't have time to follow up. So by all means, leverage your SDR to continue to move that opportunity forward. It is absolutely in both parties' interest because I already sourced that demo. You should get a portion of that sort of cash collector, that revenue that comes in. So accelerating that sales cycle is going to be in your best interest. Right? We also leverage SDRs primarily in that demo 2 function to identify other decision makers that we want to go after. So at ZoomInfo, our primary decision makers are sales, marketing, and sales and marketing operations. If I'm talking and I'm sort of single threaded in the SDR department trying to sell ZoomInfo, I'm going to leverage my SDR to get in front of the VP of sales and ensure that deal closes in a shorter sales cycle. Or maybe I'm going to go and engage with marketing to increase that average sales price or increase that sales price in that deal, right? So the relationship does not stop just through that first source meeting or just by identifying that account, right? Together, this is driving what I think is the greatest sales development, the greatest go-to-market motion in the world over here at ZoomInfo. We are generating an absurd number of opportunities per day, and it's because we have this well-organized machine. We're obviously leveraging our own tool, but we're also using data to drive these decisions, which I think is a really important aspect. What's the best comp plan for SDRs? Just to kind of take a pause there. I think that's a really great question. I think it really depends on the organization, right? You want to definitely, you need some smart people, right? Some people much smarter than myself to determine, right, what's the customer acquisition cost and how does that factor in terms of commission? What are the important activities that lead to every part of the funnel? For ZoomInfo, it's leads generated. So what is our marketing team generated? It's also from our demand gen team who's supporting our outbound team. How are they identifying accounts and contacts? Right, we pay our SDRs on what we call a completed meeting. So a completed meeting is, I schedule a demo for David over at Tenbound. David shows up, the account executive runs that demo. He determines that there's an opportunity to sell them something, right? The alternative is what we call a completed bad fit. So David gets on that call, the account executive does his best, puts his best foot forward and says, you know what, David just wasn't biting on anything. There's just no opportunity right now in sort of an agreed upon acceptable timeline, which is probably a really controversial topic for a lot of AEs and SDRs, right? If you have a 60-day sales cycle and they say they're buying in 6 months, well, that's probably pretty subjective to the AE, right? Maybe I'll open up an opportunity and sit on it and leverage that SDR to send some more collateral or expand to other decision makers. But ultimately, the way that we pay people are on the completed meetings. So meetings, and then also on revenue, right? Pipeline is super subjective as well, right? So we try not to pay SDRs on that. But if that deal closes, we give them a percentage of that revenue. So they get paid on the meeting showing up and turning into an opportunity and that deal closing. That's actually a great transition there from Oriel at CodeFresh. So here's a little bit about how our SDR sort of talent pipeline is managed. The majority of SDRs in our organization, and even account executives that started off as an inbound SDR. Now, again, this is very specific to ZoomInfo because we generate a ton of inbound interest just by the nature of our product and the nature of our total addressable market. So we bring in SDRs and we start them off on our inbound function, which really allows them to have more conversations earlier on, and they're warmer conversations. So if you've never cold called before, putting someone in a sink or swim environment is typically not the best call, right? So we get them on the inbound team, they're fielding leads, they're understanding more about our total addressable market, they're understanding more about the personas that we sell to, they're understanding how to position different features and functions of ZoomInfo. And when they're ready, and we're a meritocracy, so we promote people through the organization based on their metrics. When they're ready and they're sort of at the top of their class, we move them to that pooled outbound SDR function, right? And those sort of timeframes that you're seeing there, 1 to 4 months, 5 to 6 months, right? We've had reps do that much quicker. So when you have a rep that is clearly, right, succeeding and accelerating over his peers, you definitely want to reward him and promote him. But those pooled SDRs, that's their sort of first taste of cold calling. They're handling warm leads, so indirect interest of ZoomInfo. They're also going and identifying target accounts and cold calling, building strategies to go after those accounts. And when they book that demo, they're not subjective to one specific SDR's sort of idea of what a good fit is, which really helps drive pipeline and gets these meetings in front of the right people in our organization internally, right? And then you go to what we call a gold or a senior SDR, where you're actually paired 1-to-1 with a strategic or a strategic plus account executive, right? And that typically lasts 8 to 12 months, right? You're not in those roles very long because you're moving all through the organization. And our average tenure at ZoomInfo is, much lower, but the average time to getting promoted is right around 12 to 16 months. And then the most common roles that we promote outbound SDRs into is a commercial account executive or a SMB account manager if they wanted to go on the account management side. Another great question, would you have SDRs be part of this marketing or the sales org? Is there a difference between inbound to outbound SDR teams? Hopefully this answered a little bit of it, but we absolutely put the SDR team under the sales organization, right? We do that because if you have the account executive, right, organization as part of the sales organization, right, we are handling the top of the funnel leads that marketing is generating, but we need to do it under the sort of the guise and the direction of the account executive leadership, because that ultimately is going to drive feedback back to the marketing team, right? That's also a great way to create alignment, because now you can clearly silo, like, okay, marketing is generating this number of leads, sales is converting at this percentage, right? You're no longer sort of, pumping up your own numbers by converting leads that shouldn't be converted. You're actually using the SDRs as sort of a filter of quality, which is really important. But this has been super instrumental to our organization and how we've grown. We have SDRs that go into a lot of those other roles listed there. So a customer success manager, we've had people go into demand gen marketing, which totally makes sense, right? You're an SDR reaching out to people, writing up sequences, doing that at scale and leveraging technology to do that on behalf of a number of SDRs. When you're really, really good at that, just makes sense. Myself, I actually gravitated towards an operational role. I got really, really good at our systems and tools, and I understand what we were trying to accomplish. So I went to a sort of a pseudo sales operations role. We've also had people go into product marketing. We've also had people go into account management, learning and development, sales enablement, even internal recruiting, especially if they have recruiting background in the past. But what that does, right, you may be thinking, well, Tyson, I'm just going to get people here, they're going to do well, and then I'm going to lose them, right? But the talent market is going to see that as a place that they want to be, because they know they can actually start their career here, and you're not going to try to handcuff them from getting to that next role. Another really great question from Brian. Today, all of our North American BDRs, SDRs are managing both inbound and outbound activity. At what point does it make sense to consider splitting inbound and outbound, and what are the pros and cons? Well, I think that 100% has to do with lead volume and conversion. Right? If you feel like you're leaving money on the table because reps are getting pulled in multiple directions between inbound and outbound, then it totally makes sense to take the reps that are best at inbound, incentivize them correctly, and have them focus on inbound conversion. On the other side, if you have reps that are really good at outbound, they don't like inbound, they like the cold calling, they like the hunting aspect, I would incentivize those reps a little bit more. So now you've created that career path from inbound to outbound SDR. And the way that you do that, right, internally, if you got people that are like, well, I can't pay them the same, there's a customer acquisition cost to generate an inbound lead, or an inbound or a customer through inbound. There's a customer acquisition cost to generate a customer through outbound, right? You factor in the marketing side, the budget for the website, the budget for marketing in general, versus outbound generating that lead themselves, right? You should try to make the customer acquisition cost near the same for the organization. And the difference and the gap between inbound and outbound should be commission paid to that outbound rep, in my opinion. Right? What are some pros and cons? Honestly, I can't think of a ton of pros and cons, right? Because now you can clearly have reps focus, and they're specialized on inbound conversion. They're specialized on those talk tracks. On the outbound side, you have the exact same thing, right? I guess maybe one con would be, if you're trying to do this in an organization that's already established, moving people one way or the other could feel like a demotion in a sense. So again, you want to make sure you're incentivizing them and clearly explaining why you're doing this as an organization. You also want to look at capacity, right? If I'm getting 10 leads a month, that's probably not enough to have a dedicated person. But if I'm getting 200 leads per month and I want to generate 100 opportunities off of those, that's probably enough for one person to focus on. Yeah, so at ZoomInfo, we do 1.5% and 2%. Our average sales price is right around $17,000. So the proportion between meetings to ops close and their comp, all aligned with an OTE of around $65,000 to $75,000. It does vary by coast. That's here in Vancouver, which has a slightly lower cost of living compared to our Waltham or our Boston office. But great questions so far. This is a doc that I actually put together. I created an AE SDR alignment doc because I quickly realized as our organization was starting to scale, the last thing I wanted to do as the leader was to, be a counselor to SDRs and AEs as they sort of clash sometimes, or as they like, why didn't my AE dispo this demo? He bad fitted. It should be a good fit. He didn't try, right? Why is my SDR sending me these crappy meetings? I don't want to take these. So we created this alignment doc in collaboration with AE leadership, SDR leadership, and then our executive team had oversights. So this is just some of the highlights, some of the do's and don'ts when working in a pairing relationship, right? The do's: leverage your SDRs to work difficult accounts and prospects that require further expansion to other key stakeholders, users, coaches, and influencers, right? The SDR's job does not stop with that initial demo that they're meeting, or that initial opportunity that they generate. You need to be leveraging your SDR in as a team sort of selling environment, right? The SDRs are focused on activity, right? The AEs are focused on closing revenue, right? Hopefully the SDR is feeding that AE enough stuff where maybe they don't have time to follow up on an opportunity, or they don't have time to leverage ZoomInfo to expand within another department. And it's actually what an SDR is trained to do. That's what they're skilled at doing. So it makes sense to specialize those sort of roles, right? You can use your SDR to do an intro email to new stakeholders, right? If you get off a demo and you're talking with Brian's Director of Inside Sales and Development, and they say, Brian says, you need to reach out to my VP, but I'm not going to make an intro. I'll go ahead and get this to him, right? I may leverage my SDR because it sort of detaches me from, I guess, liability in some sense. I'm sort of able to play both angles, and I can leverage the conversation with Brian as the SDR, then reach out to the VP of sales and create that story and sort of connect the dots for them without seeming like I'm going over anyone's head. So it's a great sort of tactic to kind of build some groundswell. Right, you as an AE, you should always be updating your SDRs on opportunities that they source or opportunities in your pipeline in general. Right, you should ask the right? You should have your SDR reach out to opportunities that you think are dead, right? Let the SDR have that last ditch effort. Like, hey, this person told me a month ago they weren't going to move forward, but I kind of want to hold on to this. See if you can reach out to them and get them to say no, which I think is a really powerful skill for SDRs to learn. Because once you get the prospect to say no, right, you're going to be able to do that as an account executive that much more. And it's not even always about, right, closing the deal. Sometimes it's just about cleaning up your pipeline and giving yourself a direction on what to focus on for the rest of the month. All right, you want to review and identify opportunities that you're not going to pursue, right? Think about the 80-20 rule as an account executive. You're going to focus 80% of your time on 20% of your pipeline. So you should leverage the SDR to focus on the other 80% of your pipeline and continue to build momentum. That demo 2 concept has been huge for ZoomInfo in terms of shortening our sales cycles, increasing our average sales price, as well as increasing the win rate on deals. Really, really important aspect. And AEs, I know you're probably going to cringe at this, but update your notes, right? Put next steps, make sure call notes are in there, make sure the sentiment of the call is in there, any objections that were uncovered on the call, identify the main point of contact, identify other technologies that they're using that would be really good for an SDR to leverage in a call when you're positioning it to another company. Right? And if you get an email from a point of contact that asks you to follow up at a later date, leverage your SDR to do that, right? Have them sort of help manage your pipeline, but only do that if you are struggling with capacity to actually manage it yourself. It's a very fine balance. We definitely, if you look at the do's and don'ts, right? We don't want to CC our SDRs and ask them to send out an invite when the point of contact gives you a time. They're not your assistant, right? Send out that invite yourself. Right? Don't tell your SDRs to enter a demo in Salesforce that you've already confirmed. Right? We actually consider that stealing from the company. We do not want to give freebies to the SDRs. So that's sort of an internal thing there. We would definitely want to prevent sort of that sort of bro culture where it's like, hey, if you dispo this demo, I'll get you the next good one. Like, we definitely don't want to encourage that sort of environment. We want it to be built on accountability and feedback. Right? Don't tell your SDRs to go after something and not give them direction. Probably the most frustrating thing that you and I got working with some awesome account executives. Yeah, just go after this opportunity, see if you can get someone on the phone. Like, great. What's the use case? What should I focus on? Should I offer them a discount? Should I offer them and position a new feature or function? Should I just ask and say, like, we have some end of quarter incentives, right? Give them some clear direction. The second to last one is one of my favorite. Henry Schucker, CEO, actually implemented this one. It says, like, you should have a standing meeting, right, every Monday and every Friday, or however you want to do it, probably at least twice a week, where it's a very formal setting where the SDR is actually going to drive the agenda for that conversation, right? If the account executive cancels on you because of whatever reason, with at least 4 hours notice, Henry used to make people put $100 in a jar and used to use that money to buy pizza for the rest of the SDR team, right? And that's just a great way to say, like, hey, this is serious, right? You have to respect your SDR. You have to respect their time, right? They're there to help you, right? You should not be blowing off your SDR. And then something account executives, especially in a one-to-one pairing, you need to be cognizant of, right? SDRs are about velocity, right? And they should be prioritizing same day and next day meetings, right? So don't block off massive chunks in your calendar. That just makes it that much harder for an SDR to book a meeting with you, right? So make sure you're being cognizant of that. Don't say it's admin time, right? There's exceptions during the end of the month because we want to focus on closing, but in general, right, try to keep your calendar open so the SDR can sort of use that to their advantage. And just to kind of sum everything up, high accountability, high growth SDR is what's going to make your AE culture. Building this culture starts with educating your SDRs on how these motions will drive success, not only for the company, but also for each other. Create a common understanding with clear objectives that enables everyone to be on the same page to drive towards the same goals. Some other key takeaways: specialization is super important. Separating inbound, outbound, account executive, different segments. When do you actually get a pairing? Set super clear expectation. Don't put an AE or an SDR in a relationship unless they're okay with mentorship. Make sure you're optimizing tech in the process, and make sure you have checkpoints for career growth. Thanks, everyone.
That was amazing, man. Thank you so much that was meaty, dude. You gave us a lot of homework. But you know, if you think about it, ZoomInfo has been a rocket ship, and it's almost like you guys built the SDR program and then the company, you know, versus what most companies, it's like build a company. Oh yeah, we need SDRs. So
100%.
It's just been an amazing ride.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. I couldn't agree more. It's been a rocket ship, and right, if the SDR team isn't sort of the foundation of your organization, just like the marketing team isn't sort of right there with them, you know, we're all trying to generate money and generate revenue and make sure the people that are doing it at the front line are definitely held up on a pedestal in your organization. That's going to drive a lot of growth and drive a great culture, in my opinion.
100%. And I mean, I know that you guys are hiring like crazy. So it seems like, you know, don't want to poach anybody, but a great opportunity for career growth. And we'll definitely make sure that folks can connect with you. Thanks again for coming and sharing your wisdom. This recording will be up on the Tenbound site and ungated. So definitely, I'm going to go back through and revisit it. Tyson, thanks so much for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. It was my pleasure. Look forward to the next one, David.